The massive starship Xerian's Pride drifted through the dark void of space like a glittering palace among the stars. Its crystal walls stretched for miles, housing the most powerful alien ruler in the known galaxy, Queen Vexoria of the Zeltheran. Empire stood 8 feet tall, with shimmering purple scales that caught the light like precious gems. Her 4 muscular arms moved with deadly grace as she walked through the corridors, and her reptilian eyes could freeze the blood of any creature that dared cross her path. Today felt different though, heavier somehow, as she made her way toward the medical wing where her greatest shame lay hidden from the rest of the galaxy. Her son, Prince Kethrin, had been trapped in a motionless state for 3 long years after. A mysterious illness attacked his mind. The best doctors in the Empire had failed to wake him, and according to Zeltheran law, weak children were supposed to be abandoned to die with honor. But Vexaria could not bring herself to follow this ancient tradition, even though keeping him alive marked her as soft in the eyes of her people. She visited him every day at the same time, hoping for a miracle that never came. As she approached the medical bay, the sound of a gentle human voice drifted through the partially open door. Queen Vexaria froze in her tracks because no one was supposed to be in that room except the medical staff during their brief daily checks. Peering through the crack in the door, her 4 eyes widened in complete shock. A human male sat beside her son's bed, carefully cleaning the prince's delicate scales with a soft cloth. The man had gentle brown eyes and graying hair, and he hummed a strange melody while working with hands that moved like he was caring for something infinitely precious. Marcus Chen, one of the ship's many human janitors, spoke softly to the unconscious prince, as if the young alien could hear every word. He adjusted the feeding tubes with expert care, repositioned the prince's body to prevent bed sores, and even read aloud from what appeared to be a colorful picture book filled with Earth stories. The queen watched in stunned silence as this lowly human, who was considered barely above a machine by most of her kind, treated her son with more tenderness than anyone had shown him in months. Marcus gently flexed the prince's arms and legs, explaining to the motionless child that movement would keep his muscles from getting weak. Then something impossible happened that made the queen's heart nearly stop beating. As Marcus read about brave knights and flying horses, the prince's smallest finger twitched slightly. The human's eyes immediately filled with tears of joy as he whispered encouragement to the young alien, telling him that he was still there, still fighting, still worth every effort. Queen Vexaria gripped the doorframe with all 4 hands as emotion she had never experienced before crashed through her mind like a violent storm. This human was showing her son the kind of care that her own people considered weakness. Yet somehow the prince was responding to it. Marcus carefully tucked a soft blanket around the prince and placed a small earth flower in a cup of water beside the bed, explaining that colors and smells might help stimulate the sleeping mind. As he gathered his cleaning supplies and prepared to leave, he leaned down and whispered something that made the queen's blood run cold with its simple power. "Tomorrow, I'll tell you about the little Earth girl who learned to walk again when everyone said she never would." The human turned toward the door, and his face went white as bone when he saw the towering alien queen blocking his path. Her purple scales seemed to glow with inner fire, and her reptilian features remained completely unreadable as she stared down at him with eyes that had ordered the destruction of entire planets. The silence stretched between them like a blade ready to fall, and Marcus knew that his life hung by the thinnest thread possible. Queen Vexaria's voice cut through the air like shattered glass when she finally spoke the words that would change everything. "Human, explain yourself." Marcus Chen's hands shook like leaves in a storm as he faced the towering alien queen. Knowing that touching royalty without permission was punishable by immediate death in the Zeltheran Empire, Queen Vexaria Stir's forearms crossed over her chest. As she stepped into the medical room, her massive frame blocking the only exit while her burning eyes demanded an answer that could either save his life or end it in the next few seconds. The human janitor swallowed hard and found his voice, explaining in trembling words that he had noticed the prince was developing pressure sores from lying in the same position for too long, and that his muscles were wasting away from lack of movement. Marcus revealed that he had lost his own daughter Emma to a similar condition back on Earth, and watching the young prince suffer in the same way had broken something inside his heart that he could not ignore any longer. The queen's expression shifted from rage to something far more dangerous: curiosity, as she demanded to know what a lowly human could possibly understand about caring for Zelthran royalty. Marcus gathered his courage and explained that illness affects all living beings in similar ways, regardless of species, and that he had spent years learning how to care for his daughter when the doctors gave up hope. He showed the queen how gentle massage could improve blood flow, how changing positions prevented painful bed sores, and how talking to unconscious patients might stimulate brain activity even when they appeared completely unresponsive. Queen Vexaria listened with growing amazement as this insignificant human described medical concepts that her own advanced doctors had never mentioned. Simple techniques focused on comfort and dignity rather than just keeping the body alive. She questioned him about his methods with the intensity of a military interrogation, learning about human concepts that seemed impossible to her warrior mind, the idea that families never abandon their sick. That weakness deserved protection instead of elimination, and that hope could exist even when death seemed certain. Marcus explained how he had secretly been caring for the prince for several weeks, sneaking into the medical bay during his cleaning duties because he could not bear to see a child suffer when simple care might help. The queen demanded to know why he would risk his life for an alien child who meant nothing to him, and Marcus replied that on Earth, anyone who could help a suffering child and chose not to was considered the weakest kind of person possible. This answer hit Queen Vexaria like a physical blow because it challenged everything her society believed about strength and survival of the fittest. She studied the human's face and saw no deception, only the same fierce determination that drove her best warriors into battle, except this man was fighting against suffering instead of enemies. The queen made a decision that shocked even herself. She commanded Marcus to continue caring for her son, but under her direct supervision, so she could learn these human methods. The announcement sent ripples of horror through the ship as word spread that their mighty queen was lowering herself to learn from a human servant, and several high-ranking officers exchanged worried glances about their leader's mental state. Marcus began teaching the queen how to move her son's limbs through gentle exercises, and she struggled to control her powerful claws and forearms, which had been designed for war, not for tender care. As days passed, the queen found herself looking forward to these sessions, not just because her son showed tiny signs of improvement, but because Marcus treated her like a worried mother instead of a fearsome ruler who could destroy planets with a single command. The human shared stories of Earth families who fought impossible battles for their loved ones, introducing the queen to emotions she had never been allowed to feel in her harsh culture. However, their secret lessons were being watched by General Vexmore, the queen's most trusted advisor, who grew increasingly disturbed by what he saw as dangerous contamination of their leader's mind by inferior human weakness. And he began making plans that would threaten everything they had built together. Queen Vexaria's powerful claws, which had once torn through enemy armor in countless battles, now trembled as she attempted to gently massage her son's withered limbs under Marcus's patient guidance. The human janitor watched with quiet pride as the mighty alien ruler slowly learned to control her for massive arms, transforming weapons of destruction into instruments of healing as she followed his careful instructions. Day after day, they met in secret sessions where Marcus taught the queen movements that seemed impossible for her warrior body, how to lift the prince's arms without causing pain, how to flex his joints to prevent stiffness, and how to speak to him with the soft voice of a mother instead of the commanding tone of an empress. The queen found herself fascinated by Marcus's stories of human families who never surrendered hope, even when their doctors declared cases hopeless, and she began to understand concepts that her brutal society had never taught her that true. Strength sometimes meant protecting those who could not protect themselves. As weeks passed, Prince Kethrina's condition showed remarkable improvements that amazed the ship's medical staff. His scales regained their healthy shine. His breathing became deeper and more regular, and most incredibly, he began to show small responses to familiar voices. Marcus shared the story of his daughter, Emma, who had fought the same type of illness for 7 long years before finally losing her battle, and how caring for her had taught him that love was not weakness, but the most powerful force in the universe. The queen listened with growing wonder as the human explained how Earth's parents would sacrifice everything for their children, how communities came together to support families in crisis, and how humans believed that every life had value regardless of physical strength or ability to contribute to society. These ideas struck at the very foundation of Zeltharan culture, where the weak were abandoned and only the strong deserved to survive. Yet Queen Vexaria found herself drawn to this different way of thinking, like a moth to flame. She began asking Marcus about human emotions she had never been allowed to feel: compassion for the helpless, hope against impossible odds, and unconditional love that expected nothing in return. The human patiently answered her questions, sharing wisdom that his own species had learned through thousands of years of caring for each other. And the queen discovered that her heart was capable of feelings she had never imagined possible. Marcus taught her human lullabies that seemed to calm the prince, showed her how to read Earth stories that stimulated his mind, and most importantly, convinced her that talking to her son as if he could hear every word might be the key to bringing him back from the darkness that trapped his consciousness. Meanwhile, General Vexmore watched these sessions through hidden surveillance devices with growing alarm, convinced that his queen was being corrupted by dangerous human weakness that would destroy their empire's strength. He documented every tender moment between the queen and her son, every lesson Marcus taught about compassion and hope, and every sign that their mighty ruler was abandoning the harsh traditions that had made their species the most feared force in the galaxy. The general's reports to the High Council painted a picture of mental contamination and warned that Queen Vexaria's obsession with human concepts of caring for the weak would lead to their empire's destruction. As the queen learned to stroke her son's scales with gentle care instead of warrior's roughness, and as she began to see Marcus not as a lowly servant, but as a teacher of profound wisdom, the prince showed his first real sign of consciousness. In 3 years, his eyes fluttered open for just a moment and seemed to focus on his mother's face. The joy that filled Queen Vexaria's heart was unlike anything she had ever experienced. But their moment of triumph was shattered when the medical bay doors burst open and General Dexmore entered with a squad of Imperial guards. His face twisted with disgust as he declared that their queen had been declared unfit to rule and was under arrest for contamination by inferior species. Ideology. General Dexmore's armored boots echoed through the medical bay like thunder as he stepped forward with a squad of elite Imperial guards, their weapons gleaming under the harsh lights while his scarred face twisted into a mask of righteous fury. The general's voice boomed with authority as he declared that the High Council had reviewed his evidence and found Queen Vexaria mentally compromised by human weakness, making her unfit to lead the warrior race that had conquered half the known galaxy. Through strength and merciless determination, Marcus instinctively stepped in front of the prince's bed, knowing his fragile human body would be crushed instantly, but unable to abandon the child he had grown to love. While Queen Vexaria rose to her full 8-foot height with all 4 arms, spread wide in a gesture of defiance that made the room tremble with barely contained power. Dexmore sneered as he explained his master plan, how he had secretly recorded every tender moment between the queen and her son, every lesson about human compassion, and every sign that she was abandoning the brutal traditions that made their empire strong. Then sent this evidence to the council as proof of her corruption. The general commanded his guards to seize Marcus for immediate execution and to dispose of the prince according to ancient law, declaring that weakness had no place in Zeltharan society and that caring for the disabled was a disease that would spread if not cut out like a cancer. But Queen Vexaria had learned something powerful from Marcus about the strength that comes from protecting others, and she roared a challenge that shook the entire ship. She demanded trial by combat for the right to rule, not just for her throne, but for the right to define what true strength meant for their entire civilization. Dixmore accepted with savage glee, believing that months of gentle caregiving had made his queen soft and weak, while his own body remained hardened by constant warfare and brutal training that had never known the touch of mercy or compassion. As the combat arena was prepared according to ancient tradition, Marcus sat beside the prince and whispered stories of human heroes who had found their greatest strength not in conquest, but in their willingness to sacrifice everything for those they loved. The queen listened to these tales while sharpening her ceremonial claws. Finally, understanding that the humans Marcus described were not weak, but possessed a different kind of courage, the bravery to stand against overwhelming odds. Not for glory or power, but simply because it was right. When the two Zeltharan warriors faced each other in the circular arena surrounded by the entire ship's crew, Dexmore fought with the cold efficiency of a killer who had never questioned the righteousness of abandoning the weak, while Queen Vexaria fought with something entirely new, the fierce determination of a mother protecting her child, and the burning conviction that true strength meant lifting others up instead of crushing them down. The battle raged across the arena floor as both warriors used every weapon and technique their species had developed over centuries of warfare. But something had changed in the queen's fighting style that her opponent could not understand or counter. She fought not just with physical power, but with the emotional strength that Marcus had shown her, the unbreakable will that comes from fighting for something greater than yourself, and the knowledge that every blow she struck was protecting not just her son, but a new vision of what their empire could become. As Dexmore grew tired from his brutal assault, Queen Vexaria's strength seemed to grow stronger, fueled by love instead of hatred, by hope instead of fear, and by the revolutionary idea that protecting the vulnerable was the greatest achievement any warrior could accomplish. The final blow came when Dexmore stumbled, exhausted by his own rage, and the queen stood over him with claws raised for the killing strike that tradition demanded. But instead of ending his life, she chose mercy, another human concept, and banished him from the empire forever. As she reclaimed her throne with blood on her claws and victory in her heart, a weak voice whispered from the medical bay where Prince Kethrin had awakened and spoke his first word in 3 years. Not in Zeltharan, but in English, as he reached toward Marcus and said, "Friend." Prince Kethrin's recovery became nothing short of miraculous as Marcus continued teaching both mother and son the human arts of patience, hope, and gentle determination that had been completely unknown in Zeltharan culture until now. Within months, the young prince was not only walking again, but speaking in both languages, his mind sharp and his heart filled with the compassion he had learned from watching the human janitor who had refused to abandon him during his darkest hours. Word of Queen Vexaria's revolutionary transformation spread across the galaxy like wildfire, carried by traders and diplomats who whispered in amazement about the fierce warrior queen, who had defeated her strongest general not through hatred, but through a strange human concept called love. Some planets in the Zeltharan Empire erupted in rebellion, led by traditionalist generals who refused to accept a ruler who showed mercy to the weak. But to everyone's shock, other worlds began sending messages of support as countless families revealed they too had been secretly caring for disabled relatives in hidden shame. The Queen's bold decision to establish the first compassionate care centers throughout her empire created a revolution that no one had seen coming. As millions of Zelthrans discovered they were not alone in their forbidden feelings of love for those society had labeled as worthless, Marcus found himself transformed from a humble janitor into the director of compassionate care, the first human ever to hold a position of honor in the alien court. And his simple earth wisdom became the foundation for laws that protected the vulnerable instead of destroying them. The changes rippled outward like waves across the cosmic ocean as other alien species watched in fascination while the most feared empire in the galaxy became something entirely new, a civilization that grew stronger through unity and compassion rather than conquest and terror. Queen Vexaria's enemies had predicted that showing mercy would make her empire weak and vulnerable to attack. But instead, the opposite happened as former enemies began requesting alliances with a power that offered protection and healing instead of domination and destruction. The Queen's military remained as strong as ever, but now they fought not to conquer new worlds, but to defend those who could not defend themselves, becoming peacekeepers and protectors rather than invaders and destroyers. Marcus established schools where human and Zeltharan children learned together, sharing stories and wisdom from both cultures, while Prince Kethrin became living proof that strength could come from overcoming weakness rather than simply being born without it. The young prince grew into a bridge between two species, carrying forward the best qualities of both his mother's warrior heritage and his human teacher's compassionate wisdom, representing a new generation that would never again abandon those in need. As years passed, the transformation of the Zeltharan Empire became a beacon of hope for the entire galaxy, proving that even the most brutal civilization could change when shown a better way to live and love. Queen Vexaria often stood in her throne room and marveled at how a simple act of kindness from one human janitor had changed the course of galactic history, demonstrating that true power came not from the ability to destroy, but from the courage to heal and protect. The Empire's greatest strength was no longer their weapons or their fear-inspiring reputation, but their capacity to learn, grow, and care for one another in ways that created genuine loyalty rather than forced obedience. Marcus had taught them that nobility was not something you were born with, but something you earned through service to others. And this lesson transformed not just laws and policies, but the very hearts of an entire species. The final scene of this incredible transformation showed Marcus in his classroom, now old and gray, but still teaching, surrounded by young Zeltharans and humans, learning together while Prince Kethrin sat beside him as co-instructor. Both species discovering that the greatest adventures came not from conquering new worlds, but from building a universe where every child could grow up safe, loved, and valued regardless of their physical abilities or the color of their skin or scales.